Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our Ask the Expert tonight. My name's Callie. I'm a physical therapist here at the Power Gym. Our experts for tonight are Jennifer Bazan-Wigle and Amy Holthaus. Jen has been working with people with Parkinson's since 2013. She's one of our faculty for our workshops where we teach other exercise professionals and therapists about the power moves. And then Amy completed her final clinical placement here with us at Power, and we loved her so much, we didn't let her leave. So she joined us after graduation in 2021. If you guys have any questions, let's try to keep them until the end if possible. If you're on Zoom and you have questions and you're worried they're gonna leave your mind, feel free to type them into the chat. But otherwise, I'm gonna go ahead and hand it off to them so we can get started. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us here, our people here in person. It's always nice to have at least a few people in front of us, which is great. It feels like we're actually talking to real people, but thank you all for also coming from afar, from your homes and wherever it is that you're at. So we're looking forward to all your questions. All right, let's get started.
All righty. So I think the first question to sort of address here is what is freezing of gait? And so you can see just sort of a definition here that I think sums it up pretty well. But it's the sudden involuntary inability to move. It's that feeling where your feet feel like they're glued to the floor. They're stuck. You're trying to take a step and you just can't. So you can see on the slide here that there are a couple different categories that we can sort of categorize these different triggers for freezing. One being the environment around us. So tight spaces, cluttered spaces, doors, crowds, maybe even a change in the floor. Sometimes that is just a trigger where it really, you feel like your feet are just stuck. Another situation, a different kind of category, is this idea of temporal. So kind of speed, being in a hurry. So maybe you get up to answer the phone quickly or crossing a street. I often think about escalators as being, something where you have to make that quick decision to get on. And when do you do that? And that can be a really challenging situation where people feel like their feet are just stuck. Another domain or kind of a category for these triggers are movement.
And Amy, we're going to share this screen. Oh, yeah, we need to do that. Oh, that was what we forgot to do.
Sorry, folks, we forgot to share the screen for the folks on Zoom. Yes, give us one moment.
Thanks, guys. Just a quick technical difficulty. I know it was, if you think it's too easy, then it probably is. Actually, just go to, you don't even need to log in. I think you can just go to, there you go. Awesome. All right. Well, there we are. Yes. No? Is it? Oh. All right. Okay. Yay. Okay. Can they see it?
Yes.
Awesome.
Sorry about that hiccup. So the next domain or common trigger can sometimes just be this movement or cognitive category. So turning, starting and stopping movement. A lot of times I think about when we're multitasking, our attention is divided on a couple different things, or even just approaching where we're heading, right? So sometimes that in itself can be a trigger for freezing. And then this last category, we often think too, and kind of see just clinically that different settings that increase our anxiety can also kind of spiral into this idea of freezing. And of course, if you have experienced freezing yourself, or if you've had a fall from freezing, it kind of leads to more fear of falling, just a little more anxious in general with all of these movements where you're approaching things, you're turning, and so it kind of spirals, and so that creates a trigger in itself. We wanted to highlight one video here because freezing of gait is a little bit different than this common term that we hear talking about Parkinson's movement, especially walking, is shuffling. So wanted to just show a video that is an example of shuffling. That's weird. Well, the video doesn't seem to be loading, but so shuffling, we commonly look at, or maybe you have kind of heard too, just shuffling gait, where the feet aren't necessarily being picked up very, very high. So you might hear like the feet are just scraping on the floor, right? You're constantly kind of scuffing those feet, those shoes. And so we're looking a little more at the foot clearance, and the step length is shortened. What we're talking about here today is a little bit different than that. This is a little more where the feet are actually stuck. It's not that they're just short steps and that the foot isn't being cleared high off the ground. So we'll kind of highlight what this idea of this fascination or this freezing of gait looks like instead of shuffling. So I just wanted to kind of differentiate the two because they're not quite the same, although this is really common for people with Parkinson's.
Oh, I have my microphone. All right. So what is the research telling us about freezing of gait? Well, number one, physical therapy is absolutely a must for anyone that has freezing of gait. And the way that we do it in physical therapy is it is tailored to those same triggers that that Amy was just discussing with you. So kind of focusing in on those areas where you might have the most issues with freezing. So we try and tailor it to those specific areas. The research is also saying that treadmill training is actually very, very helpful for freezing of gait, especially when it's used with external cues. And when I say an external cue, I'm meaning something that gives you kind of a, it's something that's giving you some form of feedback that you from the outside that helps you to either continue with that big step or something that you've got to kick or something outside of yourself that's really getting that best quality of walking on the treadmill. Obstacle training has also been shown to improve freezing of gait. There's a lot of research now on action observation or motor imagery. We see this a lot in sports. And you can anytime you're watching the Olympics or you're watching, I even think about, any type of person doing sports, they'll watch the previous game like throughout the entire week. And that's basically motor imaging. They're watching themselves move so that the next time they do it, it's better, right? That's what football players do. That's what people in the Olympics do. They they go through and they watch themselves perform. And that's actually really helpful in Parkinson's as well. Whether it's actually you doing it yourself or actually watching your physical therapist do it. And the goal is to watch you doing it successfully. So that's really the point of that action observation. The other thing that we're also finding in the literature is that training needs to be complex and it needs to be challenging. Once you reach this threshold where you're like, okay, this is easy. And if it's easy, it's not going to change you. So our job as the therapist is to keep making it more and more challenging, little by little. We don't want it to be so hard that it's frustrating, but we need it to be complex enough that you find that every time you're doing it, you're like, ooh, this is just a little bit harder. This is right here where I freeze. And it's up to the therapist to kind of push you to that point, not to make you so frustrated that you're freezing all the time, but to help you to be successful. So that's our job, to help you to create both those movement and cognitive challenges that come, especially when it happens with freezing of gait. The last thing that we'll finish out with what the research says is that your home practice, the things that we call it the homework, right? Your home practice is absolutely one of the most important things in order for you to retain the benefits of therapy. So once you leave therapy, that 1 hour of awesomeness, if you don't go home and practice, you're not going to keep it. It's really, really hard. So making sure that you have some time set aside every single day to keep those benefits that you've gained from therapy. All right. I know everybody hates homework. Sorry. So when we think about some of the common characteristics in people in Parkinson's that have freezing of gait, because not everybody has freezing of gait that has Parkinson's. In fact, they would say anywhere from about 30% of people with early Parkinson's may have some freezing of gait. And the longer that people have Parkinson's, the longer that they've been living with Parkinson's, the higher percent, that number kind of begins to increase. That percentage goes up to almost 80%. And that's what the research is telling us. So what do we see in someone with Parkinson's that has freezing of gait? We're going to see problems with balance. And in particular, we're seeing the problems that you have a hard time kind of catching yourself, that reactive step. We'll see problems with that. We will see falls, especially forward. If you're freezing and you're not able to catch yourself forward, we're going to see falls. There are challenges that are cognitive. And these are not like the memory things that we think about with cognition. These are things having to do with quickly changing directions. We call it a set switch, but it's really just going from one direction and quickly changing and going in a different direction. Turning is a type of a set switch. And that set switch can be directionally, but it also can be environmentally, like what Amy was saying. There's also this challenge with, they call it impaired inhibition. I call it challenges with stopping and starting movements and kind of making those decisions appropriately. Anxiety. We will see higher levels of anxiety with people with freezing of gait. It's not everyone, but we will see higher levels of some form of anxiousness of some kind. And the last one I will say is a clinical observation, and this is something that Amy and I have discussed along with the other therapists. We will see more forward flex posture, so challenges with posture. And as another observation, that the eyes are cast down. And I kind of think about this very small space in front of us. So as if my posture is down and my eyes are down, we're going to see some of those challenges with freezing. Another thing that we might see is also increased stigma, leading to some isolation. So freezing, especially out in public, can be really, really challenging, especially if you don't have a strategy by which to fix it. And that, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, every time I go out and I have to walk through a door, I'm going to fall. So I'm just not going to leave my house, or I'm just not going to go and do the things that I used to do anymore. So again, those are some of the things that we might see in freezing. All right. So when do people actually have freezing? When might freezing happen? All right. So the number one is turning. That's the set switch, right? That's what we were talking about. We'll see turning, really small steps. In fact, we look at it in our observations of you when we ask you to turn all the way around in a circle. That kind of gives us some information. So small steps, especially turning. Not enough of a weight shift. So you won't see a big weight shift from side to side. You might see it very, very small. Again, it's that amplitude, a little bit of timing and incoordination that's happening. We'll sometimes see that the body starts to move before the feet do. So if I'm trying to turn towards my left, and my body is going, but my feet haven't gone, that's where we'll see some of that freezing happen. We'll also see it in transitions, like trying to get up out of a chair sometimes. That weight shift, it's almost too small and too fast. So again, it's that speed amplitude dysregulation. Sometimes getting up from the floor, we might even see it a little bit of freezing in the hands sometimes. We'll definitely see it again. There's that turning. So incompleteness when you're turning to sit. So you kind of get stuck and your hips are already on the way to the seat, but your feet haven't followed. So we see that kind of falling into a chair as well. And sometimes even flopping backward into the chair, right? So we'll see that. I see some nods out there in the crowd. Walking for certain, right? Definitely, we're always going to be watching for these really small steps. We're looking sometimes at when the feet start getting real close together. We always kind of say, keep those feet somewhat apart. Your feet are a team, right? They work on the same team, but they're not in a relationship together. So they should not be together. But that gives us a clue as therapists. And it should hopefully give you a clue when it might be happening, when those feet come together. And again, there's that freezing or a fascination too. So it's a little bit of trembling of the legs. So maybe not so much completely glued, but you're getting there. And we might also see it where you almost look like you're kind of running. We call that propulsion. You're running when you don't really want to run. Okay. So we'll see that that's when freezing might happen too. And of course, there's that walking when you're changing directions, and of course, moving through crowds, especially crowds that are unpredictable when you don't know where people are going and where they're moving to. Mobility, we'll see freezing even as people are trying to scoot forward and backward in their chairs, trying to scoot to the edge of your chair or scooting back side to side. We'll see it in crawling. And we'll also see it, you'll also might have some freezing happening even in bed. Like it's hard to move in bed. You're trying to move over to the side or roll or trying to move positions. So you might also have freezing then.
So as Jen mentioned sort of at the beginning, right, if you're having any freezing, right, seeing a physical therapist is vital. So what are we looking at in PT? Well, pretty much all of the situations that Jen just described for you all, we're looking at all of those things. We're looking at any situation that is likely going to trigger freezing. We're going to check that out during an evaluation, but we're also going to train these things. So of course, looking at initiation of walking, right? Starting, stopping movement. And so we look at that through outcome measures during an evaluation. We're also looking at turning, multitasking, walking through tight spaces, time pressure situations. This is sort of at the beginning, I mentioned those situations where you feel like you might be rushed, like answering a phone. We're going to look at those situations, but also we're going to train those situations in therapy too. So we're going to put you through situations where maybe you're in a little bit of a rush. And is that going to kind of trigger freezing? Can we work through that? Do we need to come up with a strategy that if freezing happens, how do you get out of it? And then also looking at unpredictable situations. I think most commonly when you're walking through a crowd, people change directions all the time. Sometimes people walk right in front of you and you might have to stop, kind of modulating your speed or even taking a step back. And so we're looking at all of these things. So we have a couple of videos to kind of highlight even our assessments before we do therapy with someone. And then even after, we'll go through what that might look like, and then have some video examples of what therapy, what our interventions working with someone one-on-one might look like as well.
Oh, so as we kind of think about therapy, we put up this little, I think maybe it's too small. I'm looking at it, I'm like, I should have made it really enormous and huge. And this is actually what I think of as a physical therapist, how I think about training people with Parkinson's, especially when it comes to freezing of gait. There's kind of two kind of thoughts about how we might train it. Amy mentioned that we would actually work on some of those triggers and help come up with strategies to help you kind of manage it yourself. So I always think there's two sides to it. The one on the left side is preserving it. And that's how we as therapists, that's always going to be our go-to. I want you to be able to move through the world as easily and as quickly as you can. So we're going to come up with strategies to help you do that. But the one on the right-hand side, we're going to call that a rescue strategy. And I was kind of hearing someone say, oh, if you put like a stick or a ruler or a piece of tape or something down that someone can step over. To me, that's really like a rescue strategy. Those are kind of things that we might use just, oh my gosh, I just have to be able to take a step to be safe. So we think about rescue strategies that we're going to use really for safety purposes. Like it's a kind of like, you're just trying to get out of the car and you need to be safe to do that. That may be one of those strategies that you use versus coming to therapy where we're going to work on things for you to be able to kind of think about, bring your attention to, so that could you do that yourself without having to have that external cue like a ruler or something, or a line or something out in front of you to be able to succeed and get out of that freeze. Let's see if it works. Oh, great.
So I think this video is going to work here. So this is an example of one of those evaluation tests that sometimes your therapist might do with you. And so this is called the freezing of gait assessment. So this whole assessment goes through and looks at a lot of those triggers, kind of all in one little assessment here. So you'll see the individual here going through. So he'll start stepping out of that chair, walking. So he'll walk to, there's a blue box on the floor. There's going to be 2 different turns. Then he'll have to walk through that door in front of him, turn around again, and then walk back through that door and sit in the chair. So I'll let you just kind of watch that here. So you can sort of see just a lot of kind of hesitating those steps. Oh, and just really struggling to initiate that step. And then we walk through the door. There's another turn in there. Don't really see a whole lot of problems walking through the door on either side, and then sitting back in the chair. But one thing that I observed too is even when he started standing out of that chair, kind of fell back a little bit too. So some of the triggers that I'm seeing here are just really initiation of that walking, and then turning certainly.
All right, we're going to look at another type of an assessment. This is one that we do with, I think, everyone here at the gym, and it's called a timed up and go. It also has get out of a chair. It also has start walking. It has a smaller turn. So instead of a 360-degree turn, which you saw the previous one go through, so we're not turning all the way around in a circle. We're just going to turn out. We're going to go out, turn, and come back to the chair. But you have to also turn to sit in the chair. So go ahead and we'll watch this one as well. Looks okay so far. And now things have kind of stopped. And then we're stopping again. Stopping again. You can see that tremulous leg going. You can see the eyes are cast down. Posture is a little down. She's actually reaching for the chair even before she's got it. And you can kind of see those hips are going, but the feet haven't even gotten to the chair. So that's that incompleteness of movement to really it's kind of her rescue strategy to try and be safe.
So I think Jen kind of mentioned previously about the importance of external cues, and we also have a couple video examples of what treatment might look like. And so we use a lot of external cues. And so really trying to challenge, different things out in the person's environment to help facilitate the things we're looking for, to come up with their own strategies that are going to work. And first of all, prevent these things, kind of the preservation, that left side of that image. And then also, if that freeze does happen, how can we use these strategies? And using the equipment sometimes is a really great way to help implement these strategies to rescue as well for that safety.
And it also helps kind of drives success. I think that's the other part that we're trying to do too in therapy. The goal is not to make you freeze. The goal is to help you not freeze. But we're going to put you in situations where you actually your attentional focus is really high. So we're going to use those cues to then kind of help guide you to be more successful, and so that you're not freezing.
So I have a few videos here just highlighting what training might look like. As you saw in the video with this individual, turning was one of those triggers that facilitated the freezing for him. So we're going to break down a little bit of turning here in some of these videos. So you can see in the first video, we're really just kind of working on pointing our toe to the side. This requires him to shift his weight to his other foot and then start to get ready to change that direction. So we're just kind of breaking down the very first part of turning. You'll notice in these videos that he's got this crazy little pool noodle strapped to the back of his head. And that is that external cue for posture to try and facilitate getting that head up. His objective was really to try and keep the back of his head as close to that pool noodle as he could during our drills here. This video, we're using the wall as a little feedback so that we really get that weight shifting on that back foot to help us take the step forward out of our turn. Now we're going to put it together. So you'll see now we're going to do a 180-degree turn, really focusing on that backward weight shifting that we use from the wall, providing that feedback in video number 2 over here. Now we just put it into practice here in video number 3. And I chose another video here, just using, these are kind of fun little fins on his feet, because he has to really focus his attention a lot. Otherwise, you're going to trip over those fins. So you have to really pick your feet up. So you have to have a lot of high attention on what you're doing. And we're also still focusing right on posture. You can see that that's still a challenge for him in this video, but still turning, right? So we're practicing the things that are challenging, that are the triggers with each person. And that's going to look different person to person. We also did a lot of treadmill training together. And I just wanted to highlight, these aren't videos, but just to highlight that we're doing treadmill training, not just walking forward, okay? So this first picture, you can see that we're doing sideways walking and we're focusing on posture. So trying to get him to maintain his eyes up. We're walking with dual tasking. So we're having him look at different flashcards and do cognitive challenges while we're walking on the treadmill. We're walking backward, we're walking uphill. So as Jen mentioned earlier, that therapy needs to be complex and challenging. We're doing all of those things, especially on the treadmill, because that's what a lot of the research points to with those external cues. And then we also need to train specific things that you're doing throughout the day. This person really loves to golf, and it was also where he was having a lot of freezing incidents going uphill on the golf course. So to the best of our ability, we're simulating that in therapy. Okay. Obviously this is not a real golf course, but trying to create a situation, right, where we're having some fun, doing something that's meaningful. But also this is pretty real life where when you're on a golf course, sometimes you got to bend down, pick up that ball, turn and go back to where you're going here. So again, we're just trying in therapy to train real life situations so that when you are out on the golf course, hopefully we're preventing those freezes from happening. But if not, we're providing you with the strategies to get out of those freezes and rescue for that safety. So we have a little before and after here, just with that same assessment. I'm going to play them side by side. So you can kind of see just the differences here in our both these turns. Going through, and the second video here, going through those turns much more efficiently. Awesome. So that is just kind of highlighting what therapy might look like, and then how we might see this kind of clinically through our outcome measures.
All right, and looking at the previous person, there was a lot of different kinds of freezing. I'm actually showing you kind of what we designed as a treatment. By the end of our dosage that I saw this wonderful client, we decided one of her biggest things was being able to walk through an airport, which is probably one of the most stressful and complicated locations on the planet of the earth, right? It doesn't matter if you're in Tucson or if you're in Chicago, the complications of airports that presents. And a lot of it is because of the sequencing and those set switching, both turning, having to do all sorts of things, get your jacket off, get ready to go into the line, try and be calm as there's 20 people behind you. And all of those sequences. So we really tried to make sure that once we were thinking about the very, really trying to get to some of the heart of some of the issues with this client, but thinking of it from a practical perspective. How do we really help her to sequence and try to remain as calm as possible? So we'll go ahead and play that. Go ahead. Hello, how are you today? There you go, there's Callie. She's the ticket lady. So even though you can see her moving, you're going to see a lot of small turns and a lot of situations where she's got to stop and then go. Lots of stopping and going. And that was probably one of the biggest things that we worked on. Being able to continue and initiate movement. Again, look at that small turn. And then again, once she's done there, also making another turn to have to go and grab all of her things and then leave. So thinking about the practicality of those turns and how that plays into how we actually work on the task that is the most challenging for this person. And again, you guys got a little pre and post. So the one on the left is the very first one. And with lots of really good home practice right there, you can see the difference between the two. That one's a little bit easier to see because of even the time difference. So even though she was looking like she was walking slowly, she actually got to her destination much quicker, a lot more efficiently, and much safer. All right. So let's think about some effective cueing strategies for gait and for freezing of gait. And like we've told you all, we're always going to be recommenders of therapy. PT and OT are kind of your go-to people to really help with freezing of gait. And in particular, you want to really work with a therapist that has some experience with it and is a Parkinson's specialist. They're going to be the ones that that know most about it and will able to be honed in on those areas. But when we think about those rescue strategies, the things that we need just to be able to continue to move, or if we see someone, you're a care partner, and you're like, oh my gosh, what do we do here? So these are some cueing strategies that we might use. I might even use them when I'm teaching group class and I see someone out in the lobby or something having one of those moments. I may give them the cue to stop or take a pause. And I use the word power up, because almost everyone here at our gym knows power up, right? We all know, everyone just like sat up really nice and tall. Right? Everyone's like power up. And I don't always mean just to power up your chest and your but also your eyes. I always say, look up to the horizon, find something out in front of you that you're going to go out and look at, and take a deep breath. Take a deep breath, because not being able to move the way that you want to is really stressful. So we want to use that breath. It's probably our quickest relaxation technique that we can use. And even just placing your hands on your hips, that also kind of puts you in this posture of superwoman or superman. So if you're doing that and you feel that way, then it's possible to even look out at your destination. I call it destination estimation. Like, how many steps is it going to take for me to get over to this wonderful person that's right in front of me? How many steps? And I can just make a guess. 15. I don't know. I can make a guess. But if I'm looking at the destination, I'm looking at her, I can make that guess and go for it. I've done a set switch in my mind. I've switched the attention from, oh my gosh, my feet are freezing, to, oh, I'm just going to go over there and walk to that chair and walk to my friend over here. It's going to take me 15 steps. So you've kind of made a little bit of a set switch of attention in your own mind. And that can work wonders to really make sure that you can get to where you're wanting to go to safely, right? So best practice even, and if you guys want to, go ahead and stand up. Stand up for me if you want to. And I want you to rock your body from side to side. Rock your body from side to side, slow. This is a slow dance. This is a slow dance, right? I think about Ginger Rogers, Fred Astaire, anything where we're really thinking about slow movement from side to side, slow, like you're doing a slow dance. Think of a lovely song where you're just swaying from side to side. This is a great posture to think about. You can also think about stepping one foot in front of the other. That's called a staggered stance. If you take one small step and put your right foot or your left foot in front of the other, and then you're going to shift your weight forward and backward. I would call this a Tai Chi move, right? As we move back and we move forward from the front foot to the back foot. This is a great way to get started. You need a weight shift. You need a power rock before you can take a step. So those are two really great strategies, whether it's side to side or forward and backward. So we'll train people to get out of their chairs with their foot. So these are my feet. One a little bit in front of the other, all right? So we'll practice that as we get out of our chair. And that can help someone to get going, all right? It helps to take the first step. And you can always go back to that same thing again. You can always stop, power up your chest, power up your eyes, find the destination. If I find my destination out in front of me, all I have to do is think, how can I get there? It's going to take me about 20 steps to get back there. All right. And then go. You need your weight shift. You need your rock. And it can't be a fast one. It's got to be slow. You got to feel that weight shifting from one foot to the other before you get going. All right. Take that big deliberate step. Thanks everyone for practicing with me. All right. And I do want to give some consideration to care partners. And I think this is, when Amy and I were looking at this, I didn't see a lot in the literature even on this as well. So we we were kind of thinking about what are the things that I might even hear some of my care partners say. And even thinking what kind of advice would our care partners give? But some of the things that we would even say is try to give the person some space. You don't want to be right in here because it's hard to move if someone's right in your space. It's hard for anyone to be able to take a really effective step if you're right in their way. So we don't want people to be standing right in front of them. We also don't want you to hurry someone. Like, okay, we got to get going. We got to get going. It's time to go. We have to go. That only increases that anxiety, right? And also it probably increases the trigger to freeze. So it's like, let's just take a breath for a second, because that's actually going to probably be your best bet, is to let someone take a breath for a second, and then let's get going. Let's slow dance together, right? Before we get going. So think about how you can avoid that hurry. Don't pull anyone out of a freeze. Don't pull anyone out of a freeze. Don't try and pull them forward, because that's only probably going to increase fear in them. And if they do fall, they're falling on you. And that's scary. All right. And also kind of identify stressful situations. And this is just from a realistic perspective. Going through the airport, very stressful. Going in and out of elevators, especially when you've got a whole bunch of people. You can imagine that there's 2 elevators and there's 20 people and we're all waiting for those 2 elevators, and the dean goes and then everybody goes, right? And you can imagine if you're someone who freezes, that's stressful. And I can't get going. Oh my gosh, there's the door that opens. So thinking about those types of stressful situations and possibly using some compensatory strategies, like thinking about a walker, especially like a U-step walker, which you have a little bit more control of. It's a little heavier. A wheelchair. I mean, there's nothing wrong with going through those stressful situations and not having to be stressed about it. Walking poles are also something that can be helpful as well. Gives you a little bit of space and clearance so that you can get going. So those are some things that we thought about. And again, those are the same cues that you can provide: that pause, that power up of the eyes and of the chest. Take a deep breath, that slow walk, that slow rocking forward and backward or side to side, and looking for your destination. For some people, and I heard this mentioned, a target to step over might help them out of a freeze. I've seen a care partner put his foot out, and he would and my client would just step right over the foot. So sometimes those are what we consider those rescue strategies, but they work. And if they work, then we want them to be used, because that's what's going to be most helpful in those situations. And that's what we got for you guys. So thank you guys. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. And if there's any questions, we'd love to answer questions.
Yeah, I have a question. Someone mentioned to me about a laser cam.
Yeah.
What do you think of?
Yeah, so that's an external cue, right? So Amy showed you that that slide with, all those crazy things on there. Oh, okay, yeah. And a laser is, again, it's a visual cue. The nice part about that cue is especially if it's a horizontal line kind of across, and we have different types of lasers, and you can get, from as simple as a line to even if it's a dot on the ground, right? You can go and step on that dot, even if it's out there in front of you. So using visual cues down on the ground to kind of help you, like, just get there. It's any type of a cue, whether it's a dot, it's a line. Our eyes just automatically are drawn to those things. And if my eyes are continuously drawn to something, it's just like anything from, growing up. We see it, I go get it. And so it kind of incites, it kind of forces that little automaticity. The hard part about always doing things on the ground is, guess where my eyes are? Down here. So we might use that, especially if it's going to help to get you again where you want to go. But eventually, if we can bring the eyes up here, and you can use some of those same strategies to help think about, I'm imagining myself walking out to Leah, and I'm going to take my 20 steps out there. I know that if I had that little laser, I would just be stepping on it with large steps. So again, practicing it either with it, but also removing some of the, we can remove it in therapy, and hopefully train it so that you don't always have to rely on it for everything. Okay.
A walker.
Yeah.
Would a walker help, like, as far as, I mean, since you're leaning on that, but your foot would still get stuck for the freezing game, would that help that?
It can sometimes help it. It can, because sometimes if I'm, and of course we would want to train using the walker, using it to actually press down on it and not lean into it, but actually pressing down into it. You would just be using it as a support system, right? It would, again, it would be a way to kind of use it for those stressful situations. And of course, using it in therapy first to make sure it's a good option is going to be probably one of the most important things. It's not the end all be all for everyone, but it can, especially if it does help, if someone just needs a little bit of support, and that, like Amy said, that fear of falling decreases because I feel better here. I don't have a,
he's gonna fall.
yeah. And so if you're always thinking in your mind, oh my gosh, I'm just going to fall, that fear of falling, guess what? If your fear of falling is high, your chances of falling also increase. They go up too.
I
So
don't know if he's afraid, but I'm
absolutely, yeah. And of course, as care partners, you're watching it and you're always like, oh my gosh, it's stressing you both out. So kind of figuring out ways to decrease that stress, whether that is doing some therapy or using something that might help you.
Tom?
So once in a while, when I start marching in place, start marching in place, and then
Yeah, there's kind of a comment about so someone has a strategy that's been working for them, which is kind of marching in place when they're frozen. And really, if that's working for you, I think that's a good strategy. Really, what we're doing is shifting our weight, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're basically just doing a rock and then you're getting going. So,
And it's big enough, Tom. It's big enough. Your march is bigger than what's happening with your freezing, right? Because freezing is really that dysregulation of movement. So your steps become so small, but so fast. I always think about like a car spinning out, right? It's just spinning out, but the car is not going anywhere. So you basically decided to just go big. You've decided to use a strategy to do the opposite of what freezing is doing. And yeah, if it's working for you, that's absolutely a great strategy. Yeah.
great.
Good question. Just wanted to comment. A year ago, we had a pole walking class, and I took them, and I said to Becky Farley, this is like, I think of this as a stigma, and she said, no, I use them whenever I go hiking. And gradually I've been using them when I'm tired, because I have degenerative arthritis in my lumbar spine. If you don't stand up straight, you're going to be like this, because that is a pain relief position for people who have arthritis in their backs. And just having the weight, being able to push down on the handle of the pole takes enough pressure off of my back that I can stand up straighter. It helps a lot. And I'm still getting over the stigma part. That'll come along.
Yeah, we love poles around here, Elaine. You know that. And I think that, again, it's just like anything, the more that we see people, and not just people with Parkinson's, but we see people of all ages utilizing poles for cardiovascular health, to help with arthritis for certain, and to even just help improve posture and help actually increase that stride length. Because if you're walking more efficiently, you're going to be safer, you're going to be faster. And those bigger steps is actually going to be probably, you're going to have less freezing when you have a little bit of support. Yeah.
I always think about assisted devices too, in the context of giving you actually a little more independence. I think people are often a little skeptical and they don't want to, for the stigma reason, use poles, use a cane, use a walker, whatever that might be. But the way I look at it is, again, if you feel like you have a little more security, you're more likely to do the things that you want to do. Your care partner is probably going to be able to feel a little more comfortable stepping away from you a little bit. It balances the challenge. So it gives you actually a little more independence using a device. So just another tidbit. Devices can be really great.
The reaction of some people, especially younger people, they just want to get out of my way. Can I help you? Can I help you?
Mm.
It's new. But they just do it.
And, I think, and that may even just be, unfortunately, the aging process. And we see that those differences between thinking that someone is frail just because they have, pulls, when really you're just, you're ready just to beat them going up a mountain. Because Becky Farley will beat people going up a mountain with those pulls. I will tell you what.
Are you guys ready for some online questions?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Repeating.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Suggestions for going down.
Suggestions for going down escalators? Woo! Like getting off of the escalator or just maintaining on one?
I think getting.
I think it's that step off. I think moving apparatuses are probably the hardest for us as therapists to recreate. Also because it's timing, right? It's really timing because in fact, Amy and I were talking about this, even those moving escalators that are those moving walking paths, because that walking path is going at a certain speed. And then all of a sudden you step off, you're getting ready, and guess where your eyes are, right? They're down. So you almost have to think about looking up ahead of you. That's probably going to be my bet.
Yeah, I think definitely getting the eyes up, but I think so when you're getting on, I would take one of those moments, I would take that deep breath and I would go to one or two rocks and then get on, because it's going to kind of reset your brain. Because getting on that escalator, whether it's going up or down, is also a challenge.
I would actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I would probably be in a staggered stance.
In a staggered.
And I think I would be in a staggered stance. So for whoever asked about the escalator, thank you, because now I'm thinking about all these things. And I think I would be in a staggered stance and kind of be ready with that, whatever my strongest leg is behind me. And of course, hopefully you're holding on so that once you get to that edge, you're ready to go. So that if your feet are together, glued, and all you're doing is waiting, because you're just anticipating that the end, I would get ready in a staggered stance if you could, if that hopefully helps. Get ready in that staggered stance, because then that back leg is ready to step out and get you.
What do you do when depth perception is a problem?
Question is, what do you do when depth perception is a problem? If depth perception is a problem, I think your strategies probably are going to be leaning a little bit more away from the visual cues on the floor. I think those strategies might look a little bit more like really focusing on your posture. And if you can, I mean, even if you're looking and using that destination estimation principle, even if you might not know exactly how far that destination is, even set switching, right, and just kind of shifting your attention to the destination can be enough of a strategy, whether, that's 5 steps or 20. And even if that number is off a little, it can get you going enough so that you're kind of getting out of it. But I would think a little less on the visual.
And more audio cueing. So there is a lot of there is research to show that audio cueing, and whether that we use a lot of you guys know we use metronome a lot. So that's kind of that setting that beat. So for those of you guys that, did piano lessons as youngsters, thinking about that metronome and how it really kind of drives that timing and coordination, we would probably use that a lot more whether it's the audio cue. I would even probably use some feedback, even, Amy used that noodle as feedback externally, so out back here. So that was actually, he had to feel that. He had to kind of feel where that was back behind his head to really maintain his best posture. So it wasn't necessarily he was looking back there, he had to feel it. So you can use some other type of your other senses, your proprioceptive is what we would call it. So your sense of kind of touch, whether it's at the feet too, and using maybe more audio cueing.
This wasn't a question as much a comment. I
Yeah.
think it'd be good to talk about. Somebody was saying how the hardest part is when they've been sitting for a while and when they get
Yes.
stuck.
Yeah. So someone asked just a comment about initiating and getting, especially if they've been sitting a long time, which a lot of you guys have been sitting a long time. So how do you get moving, especially out of a chair? We teach in class, we'll teach it in class and I'll teach it in therapy. I teach a power rock up to stand. And again, you stand up with your feet slightly one in front of the other. So if you would, go ahead and practice this for a second. So put one foot just slightly in front of the other and think about standing up with that one foot in front of the other. So stand on up. So stand on up with one foot in front of the other, just a little bit in front of the other. And if one foot's in front of the other, did you everyone get one foot in front of the other? Whatever that back foot is the one that you're going to take that step with. So that's the one that's going to get you moving. Whatever your back foot is going to get you moving. Yeah, I see that top, I see that toe, but eyes have to be up, right? Eyes have to be up so that you can take that right foot and go. You got it. Yeah. So that might be one strategy that we might use. Yes, Liz.
All right, I'm tracking back a little, but one issue I have when I walk, and his name Amy knows, I tend to look down,
Yeah.
is if you're on the sidewalk going into a post office, so many places are uneven. And you don't want to trip and fall.
Oh, and I'm not saying don't look down, Liz.
I have to.
But yeah, we do, especially if we're at places that have uneven surfaces. If you're hiking, that's where your eyes are. I'm looking down too. But there's a time where if I am like somewhere in that location, but as soon as you walk through and into the post office, hopefully you're able to look up ahead of you because you know that your environment is safe enough. But yeah, I think that there's a time for us I would kind of say that we look down to kind of create a plan. And once I got a plan, I need to look up again. Yeah. So we automatically kind of shift our eyes from planning and then planning up ahead of us. And it's really kind of looking out to kind of get that. It's kind of the future planning, right? As I look up ahead of me. If I know that I'm free, and don't walk around here because this is a no-go zone over here. There's wires everywhere. But as soon as I know that after looking around here, I'm going to step over this and then, oh, I'm free to go. That's kind of exactly what you're doing. You definitely want to look down while you're walking on those crazy little sidewalks at the post office.
What do you do in the dark?
Turn
And
around.
Turn on the light.
Last week, my son was in friends with me after dinner. We went to Marisco, one of them, and it was like a gravel parking lot. We parked, we started walking, and I went into a pocket, but I didn't see it. So I jumped out. I said, "Oh, let me hold on to your arm."
And you know what, those are, I think, really legitimate things to do. I think that that's legitimate, especially when either you are not able to see, and then so now you and your buddy are kind of using each other a little bit because he probably can't see just as well either. So I think using each other for a little bit of that safety is probably not a bad thing.
What do you do for people that constantly have weight in their heels? Yeah, like I think that's repulsion.
So the question was, what do you do for folks who constantly have weight in their heels? So maybe that idea that we kind of talked about earlier, or that you actually saw where you're falling back in the chair, because that can constantly happen for a lot of these folks as well. I mean, we're cueing on upright, tall, powered up posture all the time. That includes really trying to get your whole footprint kind of on the floor. Okay, the whole footprint. I a lot of times even just use the idea of I want you to make your whole footprint like you're going to stand in sand. Sometimes that is enough to help kind of shift that weight forward, but I think it starts a lot with posture too. And so, but those common situations where I see people really with their weight on their heels is getting out of the chair. So a lot of times we will use things out to reach out in front. So this is a little bit different than when we're freezing when the weight's on our toes, right? This is kind of the opposite situation. So a lot of times when we're standing out of the chair, we'll use a target or something to reach forward to touch our hands to then stand up, which helps get our weight forward enough so that we're not on our heels, if that makes sense. So that is probably the situation where I see this the most is standing up out of the chair. And so standing up out of the chair and also sitting back down in the chair. So we want to be able to do that kind of controlling the weight without flopping back as well. So I think a lot of the times targets out in front of us to reach our hands to, that can be a really good strategy to kind of maintain that weight so that you're not falling back.
And I've seen with some of my clients, especially people that are constantly back here, I actually want to see what their feet look like. So a lot of times I'll take their shoes off. Because sometimes they don't even know that their toes are not actually into the ground. They may not even feel it. So actually having people take off their shoes, take off their socks, let's see those feet and let's see what people are actually feeling into the ground. Because I'll have people and their toes are just floating in the air and they didn't even know it. So that's one of those things where we want to help people to feel. I want them to be able to recognize what is it that they're able to feel. And are they not feeling it because of something different like neuropathy? And if that's the case, then we need to probably think of, again, some compensatory strategies. Because if anyone can cure neuropathy, that's going to be $1 billion paycheck right there. So until that happens, we've got to come up with some other strategies. I have had some people that wear like a small little heel lift, and that kind of just pushes them just slightly forward enough that all of a sudden the weight is shifted into their toes just enough that every time they stand up, they're like, oh, I'm where I need to be to stand up in a way that I'm not falling backward, or that every time I stand up and I'm getting ready to go, I'm not feeling like I'm gonna fall back.
And that staggered stance sometimes can be just enough where you're just a little bit more stable and able to kind of control the weight from, front leg to back leg.
So again, that staggered stance, these are my feet, getting one foot a little bit in front of the other, whether you're getting out of your chair, especially even when you're going to get ready to sit down too, and using the strategies that Amy was saying by reaching out in front of you, and then that will help control those transitions, because we'll see freezing during those transitions.
Final question. How do you use the flippers?
The question was, how do you use the flippers? With a lot of focus, actually, they are pretty challenging to walk in. So we don't use them with everyone. But for folks, if we're really trying to get them to focus in on their walking and focus on their weight shifting, when you have the flipper on your foot, it creates a longer lever for your foot. So you actually have to pick up your toes higher than you would if you're just wearing your shoes. So it's kind of this idea of like overtraining. And so then hopefully when the flippers are removed, being able to lift just your foot up or just your toes up is a little easier.
Piece of cake. And you have to be a little wider too, because the edges of the flippers are a little wider. So you've got to kind of, I call it that your toes are kind of pointing out just a little bit out to the side. which will actually help you with turning. So a lot of times with freezing, we're going to see those feet pointed in and a little close together. And that's what kind of causes that freezing. So with the flippers, you better be bad here. Snowshoes, I'm assuming, would work very similarly if we had snow, but you know, we're in Arizona, so we got to use flippers.
All right. Give a big round of applause. Everyone.
Thanks all of you for coming
Thank you all.
today.